Bada boom, back again, doing another hip hop albums ranking. This time I'm going to be looking at Busta Rhymes, Mr. Row Row like a Dungeon Dragon. So, Busta Rhymes, another New York rapper, well known for having quite an eclectic and eccentric style, sort of very prominent in the late 90s and 2000s. May very well be releasing another album soon, so that could mess with the ranking a little bit. But I thought I might as well just do the video now, just in case, because he has been threatening to release this album for quite a while, in terms of years. The most recent album was supposed to have been 2012's Year of the Dragon. I say this because at the time it was just released as a free an album on Google Play. It wasn't actually free, it was just for people who were subscribed to Google Play. It wasn't available anywhere else. I can't remember the exact nature of the deal of it, but yeah, at the time it didn't seem like it was supposed to be an official album, so I never really listened to it, and subsequently haven't been asked to, so I haven't included it on this rankings. From what I do know of the album, I don't imagine it's going to mess with the order too much anyway, so I feel fairly comfortable leaving it off there. So that means we're going to be looking at the preceding 8 albums. So, number 8, we are going to Back on My BS, released in 2009 under Universal Motown. Up there actually. So, the title was to insinuate Busta Rhymes was going to be returning to his crazy, mad self, and it certainly brought the BS on this album, but perhaps not in the way he intended to. The main issue with it is just there's a lot of ideas on here that didn't hit quite as well as I think he was hoping to, not in my opinion anyway. From the opening, singing Back on My Bullshit, to Beethoven's Fifth, bringing Mike Epps in for a hook based on a gag he did in All About the Benjamins, which wasn't particularly funny the first time round, and on this is just grating, to be honest. The slightly uncomfortable Arab Money. The main highlights, well, the real highlights on the album are the moments where Busta Rhymes actually gets serious. Aside of the fairly fun Hustler's Anthem '09 with T-Pain, you get Respect My Conglomerate with Lil Wayne and Jadakiss, and then towards the end of the album, you have the anthemic Don't Believe 'Em with Akon and T.I., and the reflective Decisions with Jamie Foxx, Mary J. Blige, John Legend, and Common appearing on there. Those tracks aside, there's not really much else to talk about with the album. It's just a bunch of ideas that didn't really come together as well as I think they were intended to. So number 7, Ain't Safe No More, November 2002, released under J Records as the sort of final album released under J Records. We will be skipping around between labels with this discography. From the title, it kind of harkens back to the early apocalyptic albums. But aside from the title track, which is one of his best opening tracks, it really feels that hard-hitting end of the world apocalyptic style again, and some stuff towards the end. Aside from those songs, is more of a overall commercial hip hop album, not too dissimilar from a lot of things that were being released around that time. But oddly enough, not so many collaborations for a time where hip hop was quite heavy on collaborations. The main collaborators on there are on the singles, Make It Clap with Spliff Star, and the remix with Sean Paul as well, and I Know What You Want with Flipmo Squad as well, and Mariah Carey, one of his biggest singles, strong rapper singer collaboration. Ra Digger and Mecca and Carl Thomas also appear in varying roles. It's production from Neptunes, Mr. Porter, Swiss Beats, Jay Dilla again, who frequently appears on Busta Rhymes albums. So yeah, some fine production on there, but other than that, not too much to sort of talk about with the album. There are quite a few songs on there, so there certainly are ones that kind of get lost in the shuffle, overshadowed by some of the more well-known songs and some of the better produced songs. Not a bad album though particularly, but not a memorable one either. And number 6, Anarchy 2000, the final album released under Elektra. This was kind of the culmination, not just of that deal, but of the early apocalyptic albums. So the idea of it being the year 2000, all the preceding albums had been leading up to the year 2000 being the end of the world, and so this album is kind of the showcase of what the end of the world actually is. Of course, the world didn't actually end, but from the intro, it tells us that the world has fallen into anarchy. Mankind has let the world go into chaos, essentially, and that as we have created the end of the world in the year 2000 via those means of just letting the world fall apart. Which is a nice ending to the apocalyptic style. It does kind of mean, though, that there's not a lot else about the album. There's no sort of particular theme of it aside from some of the more. I guess it kind of goes for the chaotic style, but it's not really fleshed out too much. And there's a lot of tracks on here, which is kind of perhaps why as well it doesn't feel too fleshed out, because there's so many songs that they don't all necessarily get an identity. But there are certainly some great tracks on there. Collaborations with DMX and Jay-Z, M.O.P., Lenny Kravitz, Raekwon and Ghostface. Production from Jay Dilla again. Just Blaze and Scott Storch produce a couple of the highlight tracks just at a time when they were starting to get established as producers. So in that aspect, it was a bit of a groundbreaking album for helping to introduce producers like that. There's some nice topics on there. There's the storytelling, A Trip Out of Town, which a long monologue which has a twist at the end. The singles, Get Out and Fire, are a bit there. So again, there's a lot on the album to digest, and not all of it kind of sticks uh, through particularly. But particularly the end collaborations and some of the stuff earlier on, there's definitely stuff worth listening to on there. You trim away some of the fat. Number 5, the Come In, the debut albums. Didn't make it number 1. So the main reason why, so first, debut album, first album under Elektra, first of the apocalyptic albums. We begin with the coming of the end of the world in the year 2000. A lot of the album was just kind of establishing Busta Rhymes as a new voice in hip hop, different to a lot of what people may have been used to with mainstream hip hop at that time. Certainly on tracks like the lead single "Hoo Ha Got You All in Check," developing his off the wall eccentric style. So much so that there's also the remix with the only other real comparable person at that time, Old Dirty Bastard, which isn't on the album, but it's worth checking out anyway because it's an interesting collaboration between two interesting people in hip hop. There's the slightly mellow and laid back "It's a Party" with Janae, which is an interesting palette cleanser on the album for a lot of eccentric, off the wall stylings. Towards the end, it feels a bit long. It's a In terms of tracks, it's a short album. I think it's actually the shortest in terms of track numbers. Some of the later ones are quite long though. There's Flipmo Squad meets Death Squad, which needs to establish Flipmo Squad and Busta Rhymes' Flipmo Squad and Death Squad, Redman, Eric Sermon, Keith Murray, Jamal. So the song is quite long to give everyone their own time to shine, which is great. It serves that purpose well, but it does mean that towards the end you do lose a bit of momentum as things drag on a little bit. But a great debut overall. Establishing himself as a new voice, helping to establish Jay Dilla as a viable producer in hip hop. So we go next, number 4, the follow-up album, When Disaster Strikes, which expanded on the themes of the debut album. But also, I guess this one kind of feels more complete as an album. Busta Rhymes had found his voice a bit more on here and found it could be more varied. So not every track is the "oh, look at me, I'm crazy." There's a variety of styles on the album, which considering there are quite a lot of tracks on the album, helps it keep going throughout the project. Collaborations on the album include Puff Daddy and Mace. Puff Daddy, helpful in the early parts of Busta Rhymes' career, was apparently the reason why Busta Rhymes tones down the style a little bit from the debut, which in hindsight did kind of help because I say it managed to make him more varied on the project. Erykah Badu's on there on One, which is a nice mellow track again. Early appearance from Anthony Hamilton. There's a few of the highlight singles, Put Your Hands on My Eyes Can See and Dangerous. and then Turn It Up remix, Fire It Up, which I mean, on this album, wasn't on the initial pressing of it. It got released later. It's, cuts Survival Hungry, I believe the song was, to make room for this track, which I think was the right call. Not necessarily to say that Survival Hungry was a bad song, but just that this song was. Fire It Up is such a heavy hitting single that it needed to make the album, really. So I'm glad that this version of the album has the track on there. So yeah, overall you get the club Busta Rhymes, the crazy Busta Rhymes, the street Busta Rhymes, the more mellow Busta Rhymes, the apocalyptic feel sort of scattered throughout the album. Is a good showcase for all Busta Rhymes styles. There's no tracks on there that kind of outstay their welcome at all. So even though it is a longer album in terms of the amount of tracks, there's nothing particularly on certainly on this version of the album anyway that's worth taking off at all. Some of the highlights may overshadow some of the other tracks on there. If you give it a proper listen, everything kind of just work well on the album. So, number 3, 2001's Genesis. So, this album was the first album released on J Records. So, this was the movement from Elektra to J. And its main selling point really is that it's a club album. I mean, if you look through the production on the album, Dr. Dre, Just Blaze, Pharrell, Knots, Jay Dilla, all deliver some huge club bangers on here. Lots of songs that just really, really hit so hard, and that's why this album for me goes so high. Just because in terms of a commercial club album, it's difficult to beat a lot of the production on here. Particularly with highlights such as Break Your Neck, where Busta Rhymes helped establish his speed rap style before everybody tried doing it, and before Busta himself kind of relied on it a bit too much as a crutch. Pastor Cavassier, both versions, part 1 with P. Diddy and part 2 with Diddy as well as Pharrell. Both hit really hard on here. Again, this version of the album has the second part on there, Cussing Out, another track from the initial pressing, which I didn't miss particularly. The Pascal Cavassier works well as a club song, and helps bring up a little bit for the end of the album. One of the drawbacks is the second half of the album kind of loses its momentum a bit after such a heavy hitting first half. Some of the songs towards the end don't hit quite as hard and start going to other topics like wife-in-law. Make It Hurt is on the towards the end, and still works really well as a track. Lyrically, there's not a lot to write home about as well. I mean, other than the breakneck pace of Break Your Neck, a lot of the lyrics are pretty simplistic, or Busta Rhymes being crazy, making weird noises, and this kind of thing. So, lyrically, it's not as strong. It's far from Busta Rhymes' strongest project, but in terms of production, overall, there's the majority of the songs on here, the beats are going to stay in your head, I would imagine, for quite a while. So that's why it's kind of the epitome of the club banger Busta Rhymes, so that's why the album has to rank so high for me. Number two, The Big Bang, 2006, the only album Busta Rhymes released on Aftermath Interscope. And if Genesis was the epitome of the club banger Busta Rhymes, this has got to be the epitome of the more serious and mature Busta Rhymes. And I think in that aspect, even though it was a number one album at the time, it's perhaps not been seen so fondly by Busta Rhymes diehards, as it with it being more of a slower album, and you don't really get a lot of the traditional off the wall Busta Rhymes. But I think in that aspect, it works well. Just by this point, serious Busta Rhymes kind of was more refreshing than crazy Busta Rhymes. And when you've got Dr. Dre handling the majority of the production, I mean, it's going to hit hard, even if it's not as fast paced as some of the older stuff. You have a great selection of bangers one after the next, and with some great lyrics on there as well. Just sort of so the slow nature of the album gives you a chance to actually listen to what Busta Rhymes is saying. The autobiographical "Been Through the Storm" with Stevie Wonder, "In the Ghetto," nice collaboration with Rick James, "Cocaina" with Marsha from Poetry, "You Can't Hold a Torch" with Q-Tip and Chauncey Black, "Goldmine" with Raekwon, "Don't Get Carried Away" with Nas, all the way back to the final Legend of the Fall-Offs, where Busta Rhymes is literally rapping about burying someone, and the sound effects of burying a person take up the ending of the tracks with a really claustrophobic, haunting ending to an album. But it just works so well. Just so as just when you thought that Busta Rhymes was just going to be the serious guy with no tricks or anything on the album, he managed to pull that out the bag. So singles, "I Love My Bitch" with Khalees and will.i.am is fine. Swiss Beats produced "Touch It." It was kind of the main selling point at the time. It was the lead single, and developed several remixes. It was a grower for me. The remixes were more interesting than the song itself, bringing on Papoose, Lloyd Banks, DMX, Mary J. Blige, all these people. So for me, the singles aren't as strong as the rest of the album, but when the rest of the album is as strong as that, I feel it doesn't matter so much. And yeah, I really enjoy this album. It's just sonically one of Busta Rhymes' better albums, lyrically as well, probably his best work. So for number one, to go Extinction Level Event, Final World Front. So this is December 1998, still on Elektra Records, with the first four albums, the apocalyptic albums, and yeah, this is kind of the epitome, the peak of Busta Rhymes, the apocalyptic Busta Rhymes, but it did manage to establish a lot of Busta Rhymes' other styles as well. You have the commercial Busta Rhymes with What's It Going to Be with Janet Jackson, the fast-paced Busta Rhymes with Give Me Some More, and Is A Wildin' With Us and Get Right With Us, with a collaboration with Mystical, where Mystical was completely incoherent for a lot of it, but it was getting popular at the time with the No Limit movement. Knots produces the first few tracks on the album, which are some of the best intro songs to an album. Uh, Jay Dilla's not on the album, which was an interesting point, as you know, obviously Jay Dilla produced a lot for Busta Rhymes in terms of the overall discography, appearing on almost every other album apart from the last couple. Uh, in terms of the albums that are supposed to be considered canon. Um, but Swiss Beats makes an early appearance on there, helping establish himself as a producer. Um, Towards the end, we get the very hard hitting This Means War with Ozzy Osbourne's, or a kind of loose remake of Iron Man. But as Buster says in the beginning, the drums are smacking. Just it showed that Busta Rhymes could bring different styles of music, as he has done throughout a lot of his catalogue, by bringing a heavy rock track to help close his project. And yeah, just hits hard. Busta Rhymes sounds aggressive on there. Ozzy Osbourne doesn't sound out of place on the album. Um, Other highlights include Parties Going On Over Here, the club Busta Rhymes, and Do the Busta Bus. So you get all the different styles of Busta Rhymes on here, from the overall overriding apocalyptic nature, the skits, fairly amusing on the album, whereas they not some of the skits on other albums aren't necessarily as amusing. Let's say the speedy Busta Rhymes, the commercial Busta Rhymes, the party Busta Rhymes, the street Busta Rhymes, the sex Busta Rhymes. You get all of it on this sound. Really, it kind of has to be for me the best overall cohesive Busta Rhymes project, and it's supposed to be the the next album that Busta Rhymes comes out is supposed to be the sequel to. It's supposed to be Extinction Level Event 2. So that's how you know this is a very strong album, when Busta Rhymes wants to make a sequel to it. Whether he'll be able to make a worthy sequel to the album, we'll have to see, and I very well may tell you the answers to that if I have to read this video again soon. But I mean, if he's able to make an album even partly on par with this album, then it's definitely going to be the best thing we've heard from Busta for quite a while. But until then, that's the rest. That's all of his discography, and I'll just have to look at the rest of the artists around to see what I can do for future projects. So until then, see you around.